All right then. So welcome you all to today's webinar, and I'm Nimna Pereira, the Student Ambassador of Sri Lanka for SpunkGo. So SpeakUp is a unique collaboration between KeyNote and SpunkGo, through which KeyNote directory members and trainee alumni will share their experiences and expertise on various topics each month. So to inspire and ignite meaningful conversations on subjects that matter and bring communities together through SpunkGo. So hope you all can hear me, right? Yes, okay. So KeyNote Women Speakers is the world's leading directory of female public speakers, founded in Singapore in 2017. KeyNote is a non-profit organization run entirely by volunteers. KeyNote aims to bring diversity in speaking stages around the world. They focus on diversity simply because diversity increases group intelligence. So SpunkGo is an all-girls organization that operates in 20 countries across the world. SpunkGo holds regular LifeSkill webinars for young women in the various chapters by hosting successful women professionals and entrepreneurs in their webinars. This is the fourth webinar in SpeakUp series. So our speaker today is Dr. Aarti Ramaswami, the Deputy Dean of ISEC Business School, APAC. She's also a mentor and an ontological coach. Aarti will share her words and wisdom on what it feels like to be a mother this Mother's Day. In the backdrop of the pandemic, she will reflect on how parents can remind themselves that enough is good enough, and how youngsters can mark this day through gratitude and appreciation for their parents and guardians. So Dr. Aarti Ramaswami, as an academic, Aarti research focuses on systems used to identify, select, and develop managerial and executive talent with, yes? With a particular interest in career success, D&I, and international assignments and cross-cultural management. Her research has appeared in top international peer-reviewed journals, and she teaches and communicates evidence from research on various leadership and management topics to MBA, Executive Education, and doctoral program participants. Aarti graduated with a PhD in Organizational Behavior and Human Resource Management from Kelley School of Business at Indiana University, Bloomington. She has a highly international profile, having lived and worked in India, USA, France, UAE, and now in Singapore. So over to you, Dr. Aarti Ramaswami, to enlighten us today.
Thank you so much, Nimna. Thank you so much to KeyNote as well as to SpunkGo for having me here today. I want to first start by saying, well, congratulations to all of you for getting this far. This is really a fantastic group of young women. And I see, when I say young, I'm not trying to be ageist, but I see participants from, can you hear me? Sorry. I see participants from all age groups in this talk, which is really very inspiring. And one of the things that Binu asked me to do was, hey, why don't you come share your experience as a parent, as a mother during the past year, which I know has been challenging for all. So my job was to come here and inspire you, but I have to say I am already very inspired by this entire group of youngsters who are running this show with SpunkGo and with KeyNote, with Binu, and every woman leader versus other positions that they might be in who have made this possible. So thank you so much for being here. Secondly, I do want to say that this past year has been challenging for all of us, regardless of which part of the world we are in. And I hope that you and your family are safe, healthy, and well. We have learned since 2020, since COVID started, depending on which part of the world you are in, it sort of moved in from the east towards the west. And we have learned to live, learn, love, work differently. And this has been a challenge for some of us, and it has been a challenge at home, it has been a challenge at school, it has been a challenge at the workplace as well, demanding skills from us that we did not know we needed, demanding us to connect with each other in ways that we might not have done before, and demanding us to parent as well as be a child or be a teenager or be a college student or be a grandmother in a way that we have not been able to be before. So many new skills have had to come to fore for us to be able to cope with the situation that we were in. And last year, I can imagine most of our time was marked by being home, whether it's for working or whether it's for being at school, whether doing our exams, trying to have great connections, working with the internet, learning new things online. Everybody knows now the Zoom has suddenly become a household term. And this is thanks to the experiences that we've had last year, but also despite the large dark cloud that has been over us for many months, there's always a silver lining that we can try to see in how a dark situation or a stressful situation can have some ways for us to open up our creativity, our sense of courage, trying new behaviors, and coming out of a new sense of identity of what this means. What are the stories that we're going to tell each other, whether it's our classmates, whether it's our peers, whether it's if you're working, what is the story that you're going to keep with you from the experiences that you've had since COVID started? And now it's still continuing, it's not finished. But these are some reflections that are going on in organizations and very much within families in terms of how we can relate with one another. Last year was also marked with no vacations, not being able to meet with friends, not being able to go to school, not being able to work from where you normally would have worked. And so despite that, what I see, the positive side of these kinds of challenges is that it has spurred so many new initiatives and entrepreneurial activities. Even SpunkGo for me is a fantastic, inspiring way for all of us to build a sense of community around one another, around the world, to be able to share, because something like this would not have been possible in another situation where coming into a Zoom, into a webinar is now second nature. We know what it is, we know how to set it up, we know how to connect with people that we might not have been able to do before. So when Binu asked me to do this webinar, she said, Aarti, how have you managed the pandemic as a parent? How can we mark this day as mothers, and how can children be supportive? And I know in this audience, we have children of multiple ages, and maybe you are teenagers, maybe you are in your early 20s, maybe you're probably much older. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. Nimna shared with you my work background, so I'm going to share with you a little bit about my personal background. So I have two daughters. They are 8 years and 5 years old, and I hope one day they will be just as enterprising as you are. When all my friends who tell me who have teenagers, I'll wait till they're teenagers, then you'll know what it's like to be a real parent. But I can tell you, if they are teenagers like all of you, who brought something like this together and bringing all of us together under this platform, I would be a very, very proud mother. 2020, of course, was a really interesting year for us as a family. And last year, in the middle of the lockdown, we, of course, forgot what Mother's Day was, because we just started to have the lockdown here in Singapore. And we kind of went on with our lives. And it's only now in 2021 where we have a little bit of a breathing space where we can start to think about the days and honor the relationships that we've had. I married when I was 25. So these are questions that some of my students, so I teach the MBA students and the master's students, and they're anywhere from 21 to 35. And they sometimes come to me asking about personal life and say, when did you get married? How did you get married? When did you have your first child? How do we balance parenting and work and so forth? So I'm just sharing with you that part as well. So I got married when I was doing my PhD. I was 25 years old, and I had my first child when I was 33 and my second one when I was 36. And depending on which country or culture you are in, that may be normal, or that may be like, oh, wow, that's a very different age group to have a child. But at the end of the day, you will learn, and we all learn to make decisions that suit us with the reality frame that we are in at that specific time. So Both my girls are still young. They are still very dependent on me as a parent and my spouse. And when I was preparing for the speech, for this talk and this interaction, I was talking to my husband, and it's a bit of a running joke between the two of us, because I have to be really honest. During the pandemic, he was the 150% parent. And I was running an organization, and I had to be there during the lockdowns, during any kind of emergencies. And he was more of the resident parent, taking care of the kids. And what parenting is from your end is a very interesting position that you are in. But what I share with you is what I have observed my husband doing as well as a parent. What I think I can learn, what I think other parents could take it from there, taken from there, and what we can share for children to be able to imbibe and practice on their own. So how can parents mark this day? And I wrote down about 4 things that I wanted to share with you. I recognized my role as a parent, of course, when I had my first child. But it was only during her birthday, her first birthday, that I felt that, wow, mothers need to be honored. Because when we think about birthdays, we always think about the child that's having the birthday. But the child is able to have that birthday because there was a mother at home, at a hospital, somewhere, laboring away to give this child, a new opening to the world, so to speak. And I realized that it's on those days that I also want to honor my mother, right? On my birthday, I actually want to thank my mother rather than receiving gifts for myself. And similarly, on Mother's Day, the first thing that comes to my mind at this moment is, how can I ship gifts to my mother? Is there something on Amazon that she would like? Is there any other way in which I can reach something to her? She's right now in Bombay. And to me, that is one way to honor the relationship that has been meaningful for me. And in some way, I would love to remind, I was telling Binu and Nimna and Netra just before we started, that I was hoping that my kids would also listen to this talk, because I'm assuming they would be inspired to do something special for me as well tomorrow when it's Mother Day. So trying to thank the relationships that have been impactful for me is really a marker for Mother's Day. And mother doesn't mean necessarily that it has to be my own biological mother. There have been lots of individuals in my life who have been extending mothering in terms of caring for me. And it could have been an aunt, it could have been a neighbor, it could have been my in-law, my mother-in-law, and they've all extended their love, care, compassion, and support in the role of whatever roles they were having but not necessarily as a mother, but they came to the relationship as with the love and the compassion of a mother. And for that, I am extremely grateful. And I think honoring that would be one way to mark this day for me. The second way I would love to mark this day is to do something special for myself. This is something that I learned in my experience in France, where the notion of balance is very, very critical. When mothers play multiple roles, suppose you're working, you're mothering, you're also having a relationship with your spouse, and then you have multiple other relationships. And all of them kind of meld together into this one identity. And in my experience, the 4 years that I spent in France, I recognized that my friends there, the French women who I was very inspired by how they were. It's a very different lifestyle, very different cultural way of looking at the world, based on my background coming from India and also living in the US. I say, wow, they make the time for themselves. There's work, there's themselves, there's the mothering, and there's doing the wife thing. But they say we need to carve out that space for ourselves. And I've noticed that we sometimes tend to be so overwhelmed with the schedule of the day that we actually don't schedule on our calendars just time for myself. And whatever special thing that may be. What I do as a special thing for myself is to do a lot of artwork. That gives me a tremendous joy. That is one way for me to relieve my stress, one way to express my creativity. And I make that time. I negotiate that time also with my spouse. And we give each other that space to say, all right, we need a breather. We love our children, we love the family, but we also need to self-care so that we can come back into those relationships with a much more replenished energy. Another thing that I would like to do to honor this day is reflections. Again, doing something special for my day, for myself, and taking time off, but also taking time off to reflect on what has been my journey as a mother. What have I been able to do? What have I not been able to do? What are the trade-offs that I have made by taking on the role of being a mother? What are the positive trade-offs, right? So trade-off doesn't always mean that you're losing something. It could also mean that I might have gained something. And I very much gained, I can say, from having perspective on how time flies. What does it mean to prioritize the different tasks that you have at work as well as at family? What is the North Star that guides me in how I spend my time? And sort of reflecting on what does balance ultimately mean for me. I've been a parent now for 8 years, and how would I want to be a parent in the next 10, 15, 25, 30 years? So that's something that allows me to reflect on who I am, not just in my work role, but also in my personal life and in the parenting role, the mothering role that I am playing for my children. And in that same note, another way that I would like to mark this day is to reflect on how the children have grown, not just how I have grown as a mother, how my children have grown, because the children I have now are not the same as the ones I had last year. They are growing at different rates. They are at different age groups. They are maturing at different ways. They have new perspectives, a new vocabulary. They speak differently. They ask questions in a different way. And the child that I knew last year or 2 years ago is not the child that's in front of me. And the same child is going to be very different in the coming years. So how can I prepare myself for that openness? Because sometimes children surprise you with in the way in which they might develop, the kind of questions that they might ask, the things that they might start to get interested in. And how can I be supportive? How can I bring that compassion and empathy for what they might be going through at school, within their friendships, even the growing pains that they have. The biggest growing pain that my child has right now is losing teeth, but then when you're teenagers, there are different challenges and there are different identities to be discovered about who you are, what your body is like, what does that mean? And I think keeping that sense of curiosity about, wow, this is truly a gift that I have been given to be a parent. And how can I bring my best self to this role, regardless of the challenges? There's always time constraints. You always maybe find difficulties in balancing what's at work, what's here. Those things will remain. At the same time, we're using this moment to take a step back and say, all right, who do I want to be as a mother? Who are my children turning into? And how do I show up as a curious, caring, compassionate mother to those new individuals that are with me? And to me, that is a sense of wonder that I don't know if I'm fully prepared for, but I have the curiosity as my superpower to be able to deal with whatever comes my way. So those are kind of 4 ways in which thanking your own mother and people who have been in the role of mothering for you, doing something special for yourself, and reflecting not just on who you are as a mother, but also who your children are turning into and how you can show up. And the second part of the brief that Binu shared with me was, okay, can you share with us how children can mark this day? How can they be supportive towards their parents? So I have a few ideas that I want to share, and I can guarantee the crowd over here has tremendous ideas as well. So I want it to be as interactive as possible. So maybe in some situations when I'm going through that, I might ask a question and then you might put some comments in, and I know there are already some questions coming in. But what I want to share with you is how we as children can be supportive. And I say we as children because I'm still, for my mother, I mean, she's 68, but I'm always her child. How can we continue to be supportive of our parents? And what are the creative ways in which we can do that? So I have 10 ways, and I've put it into different buckets over here. The first one is structure. So I'm just going to share what it is. Having some structure in our lives, in our day-to-day routines, caring for oneself, looking at caring for others, but also connectedness. So what do I mean by structure? What has helped us in the past year, especially during COVID, is having that routine, because there is no school. We may tend to wake up later. We may forget that there is a class, and that has happened actually. We just forgot that my child had to be on Zoom, and we just thought it was a Saturday, but it was still the Friday. And you remember during last year, there was no sense of what day it was. I mean, is it a Monday? I mean, are we already in a Tuesday? And that kind of a confusion sets in because we don't have that sense of routine of going somewhere and coming back. And those markers were lost. Traveling by train or by bus or by car to a new place, whether it's a school or work, was disrupted. We didn't have that to mark our beginnings and endings of the day. So having that sense of routine really helped us have tremendous stability. And we ended up just getting a big whiteboard, marking all the things that had to happen in a day, because that was a visual reminder of what needed to be done. And maybe the question that I might have for you to reflect on also is, what are the benefits that you see from having structure in your day? And do you believe that you actually have enough structure in your day? If there isn't enough structure in your day, what might you do? Where would you like to begin to build that in? What kind of conversations would you need to have, and with whom, to find some sense of routine and stability within the day? Because it helps in predicting what's going to happen next, not just for the adults in the house, but also for children. And there's enough research that shows that children find that sense of stability in the home with a sense of predictability of what's going to come next. And having those conversations obviously helps a lot in preparing them in terms of how the day is going to be structured. So that's something that really helped us as parents, not just mother or father, but trying to be the adults in the house, taking care of things that needed to be done at home. The second thing that within the notion of structure that I feel children, regardless of the age, can certainly help in being supportive of their parents is to focus on physical fitness. This is absolutely essential, not just for your physical well-being, but it is absolutely essential for your mental well-being. The same thing goes for parents as well. How do you stay sane and fit? It doesn't mean you go slog yourself in the gym. It doesn't mean you need to have all the amazing equipment that you think you might need to get some exercise. It could be a walk, it could be a jog, it could be a relaxation technique that you might use, but bringing that sense of fitness for the parent as well as the child was something that really, really helped us. So in Singapore, the rules, of course, differ around the world. We were at a same time last year, we were not allowed to go out at all, except for buying your groceries or for running or for exercising, right? So we would, and then a parent could be accompanied by a child, and that's all was allowed. And we used that as an opportunity to just get out, have some fresh air. And we even have that now, even though we don't have a lockdown, we have something called fresh air time in our schedule for our children, right? So it's not something that's, it's not always at 5 p.m. every day. So it's not scheduled in terms of time, but we check with them. Have you gotten your fresh air today? What have you done to go out? How have you stayed fit? Have you taken the rest? It also doesn't mean constantly doing something. It also means taking a bit of rest. So find some ways in which you can bring that balance, because having healthy relatives, having healthy children, the wellness of the family really elevates. And everybody might be different in the house. They may have different ways of doing that. But talking about it brings a sense of importance of having that physical fitness into your structure, because that tremendously affects the mood in which you are showing up as a mother, the mood in which children show up to the dinner table, the mood in which we have conversations in the house. So try to see if you can bring that kind of structure into the fitness part, not just for your physical fitness, but also for mental fitness into your daily routine. What would be that one thing that you would do every day or reinforce for your children or your grandchildren to do every day? The third thing within structure that I wanted to share was embracing balance, which means sometimes being bored is good. And this is what we also tell our children, that they want to be entertained, because you're a parent, you're supposed to take care of them, but you're in charge, you become of everything when you're stuck in the house, right? You become their entertainer, you become their feeder, their cleaner, their schedule keeper, their Zoom time assistant. What are you doing? Everything. And at some point, you also want that sense of taking a step back to have the time for yourself and allowing them to be independent, to figure things out on their own. And so we say boredom is good. If you're bored, Mom, I'm bored. I don't know what to do, I'm bored. Okay, so you have your artwork over here, you have books over there, you have the toys over there, figure it out. So sometimes we just throw the thing back at them and say, learn to figure it out. Maybe you don't need a parent to constantly find a way to keep yourself occupied. And that's something we learned even more last year when at the peak of COVID in Singapore, that if they are bored and if they are not in a good mood, that's okay, because they have to understand what it means to feel that way, and find ways to self-regulate their emotions, find ways to be curious themselves and be independent in learning what they could do to fill their time. It may be you're just lounging around on the couch with a book. It may be that you take a nap. It may be that you go to the fridge and get a snack, but whatever it is, you go figure it out. So there's another thing that we started saying in the house from last year was figure it out and hug it out. So we have two kids, and obviously, I mean, they're both girls, and they love each other, but they can also fight with each other. So figure it out was solve your own battles, right? Try to solve your own battles. And hug it out was, if you can't solve your own battles, maybe start with a hug. Maybe that's one way in which you sort of calm your emotions down, bring that sense of balance. If you're bored, figure it out. If you're fighting, hug it out. So that was one way in which we kept reinforcing that message, where after a point, they stopped coming to us when they were bored, because they would know what we were going to say. We were going to say, figure it out, or go hug it out. So those are things that helped us in having that sense of structure, whether it was balance, giving them the time, bringing that sense of independence, and also focusing on that fresh air time. Stand at the balcony if you need to, or go down for a walk, but do something that doesn't force you to always be at home. The big second bucket that allowed us to manage this time as parents, as mothers, is caring for yourself and how to build that self-sufficiency in children. So what can children do, regardless of the age, to help their parents in dealing with that time and being supportive of their parents? So one of the things was self-sufficiency, right? You don't need a mom or a dad for everything. And in some ways, you may not be fully independent. So maybe you're not financially independent. Maybe you still need your parents for some things from legal perspective, to sign on things or to vet some things, to make some decisions. So those are interesting conversations to have. But for the most things that you do, unless you're really a small child, maybe you have some special needs that require somebody to cater for you. But for the most part, you might not need an adult. And what are the ways in which, and maybe that's a part of the reflection, at this moment, what is it that I can do more myself that I don't need, or I do not want to take the time and the bandwidth of an already busy parent? And that's something that I would encourage teenagers, young adults to think about. How can you start to be more independent, and maybe even financially independent, in terms of doing a little internship, some sort of a side hustle or a project? And those things really give that sense of of self-worth and self-esteem. And I can tell you, when I started to work when I was 20. It was like a part-time thing I was doing with an entrepreneur who was starting a leadership coaching organization. And so my job was to figure out all the things that would help him think about training, think about which partners to do, how to manage the finances. So lots of things to learn. I wasn't making like money or something, but it was just a way to also get away from the family for some time, have that sense of independence, make a little bit of pocket money. But it also brought so much pride to my parents that, wow. And it also brought pride to my friends who felt like, that's interesting. Maybe I can also try to do something like that. And clearly, many of you would have ways in which you can try to be more independent, where you can say, what is the one thing that maybe I can stop asking mom something for? And how can I make a decision on my own where I'm also allowed to explore what is the right decision for myself? The second thing in caring for yourself as a child, young child, older child, is that sense of creativity. What have you been able to do in the past year that has allowed you to be creative? And we painted our way through the pandemic last year. So we did so many art projects, and a lot of it was just drawing the coronavirus, right, with paints or whatever. And the kids enjoyed that. We had Lego blocks of coronavirus. We had whatever toys were there, they were made into a coronavirus figure. And that for them was, let's figure out some way to make sense and even process. And some kids feel stressed, they may not be able to share that. And having that idea about, hey, change is something that is not always comfortable. Yes, you're not able to meet your friends. How can we process this in a way that brings fun to a situation that's not actually fun? And so they started to do things with coronavirus as the theme, but in a fun way, not to sort of be heavy on what is COVID and etc. But that's something that allowed or allows a child and an adult as well to be able to be supportive of one another, because that sense of creativity creates new conversations. It allows us to process emotions in a different way. It allows us to share things that, or a new perspective that we may not have been able to find that out from a child if it was just any other normal activity that we would have had. And depending on the age that you might be in, having a sense of appreciation for yourself, because a lot of times we see that teens, they go through, teenage is such a wonderful, difficult, challenging, messy period of time in everybody's lives. And there's enough research to show me there are different identity crises at different stages, but when you're a teen, there's also a sense of separation and identity from the family and who you are. The peers take on a different importance, and who you choose as your peers also becomes very important. So this is about caring for yourself. In a period of stress, who are your friends? What do you talk about? How do you cope with the stress? How are they coping with the stress? And how do you get inspiration from them? Is something that I think is very, very, a very important reflection to have. And my husband and I talk about, well, we don't have teenagers now, but when they grow up, what is the conversation we're going to have with them about how to make friends when they're teenagers? Because that's a very peer influential period. And we obviously want them to have friends who are diverse, who come from different backgrounds, but also ones who think about self-care, think about safety, think about using common sense in situations that they might feel very pushed to do. And that's a very important reflection during periods of stress like last year, and something even continuing now for many of us. Caring for others. So that was one big bucket of caring for yourself. How do you care for others? So depending on the age, how do you show appreciation as a child to your parent? Is it by thank you cards? Is it by doing something for them? Is it by saying something? And we all have our own language of showing love. and showing appreciation. It could be a hug, it could be a surprise, it could be a dinner, you're cooking something, whatever it may be. And depending on the culture, it's also something that influences the way in which we show who we are to our parents, right? In our culture, so when I say our culture in India, it's not very common to say, I love you to a parent. And it's not so common for a parent to say, I love you to a child. And I've not heard my parents actually say, I love you to each other. When I went to the US, of course, it's a very different, a different culture where this kind of open expression of emotions comes about, right? So you take the phone and you say, okay, mom, I love you. And then it's almost like saying bye. I mean, I love you is like bye, right? So you start to use that term even more often. So with that kind of cultural experience, we express more I love yous at home to the child. And of course, they also tell us, and I get many I love yous when, of course, my child wants something from the fridge that she was not allowed to take. Mom, you're so amazing. I mean, they are very manipulative sometimes with those sense of appreciation that they have. But on a more serious note, what is your expression of love that you would like to share with your mother? And or with anybody who has been in the role of mothering in your life. And maybe this is something that you can put in the chat for people to see as well. So what would you like to tell your mother tomorrow? Or what would you like to tell the person who's been in the role of a mother for you tomorrow? All right. So let's see if there's any interesting expressions, or what would you like to do for them? Let's see what comes up from the crowd here. I'm going to start with a little chat here. I am becoming like my mother 5 years into motherhood. I say the same thing to my kid that my mom said to me. Yeah. I will call her and thank her for waking up early daily to ensure that I have food. Amazing. Anyone else? So what we can do is some of you might be thinking about what to say, because oftentimes we don't take the time to think about what we are going to do. It's a compliment actually, because what annoyed me made me who I am. Okay, it's a good one. Thank her for bearing with my tantrums. Yeah, at whatever age, right? Okay, I'm in my 40s now, and I can tell you I still give my mother a hard time, and she knows who I am, and she's very happy I have kids who give me a hard time. She says, yeah, but you see, what goes around comes around. Now you know better. So think about what you might do for your mother or the person who's been in your mother figure. Eat a meal together. We have the culture in India where if you're above 18, we still stay together. Yeah. Cutting cake, be grateful for everything, for her sacrifices and for our survival. Fantastic. So I will let the ideas come in, and everybody can see what's in the chat. And I want to move on to a few other ideas that I want to share as well. So that was caring for yourself and others. And within that, I also want to share something about not just doing it alone, right? Maybe some of you have siblings. It could be an elder sibling, or it could be a younger sibling. And that relationship is also very critical to how we show up as a child, or how we show up in the house as children to our parents. And trying to find a way to connect with your brother or your sister and find a way to partner with them that allows for that sense of reinforced support for the parent. And you can find very creative ways. Maybe as a brother and a sister, or your two siblings, you think about what chores you're going to share together, simple things. And that's what we ask our kids to, like, you figure it out. This is what you need to do, but both of you have to share that and help mommy and daddy in managing that. Maybe you can split some activities and have the conversation. When we think about parenting, I can tell you with 2 kids, we think the children are from the same household, they have the same parents, but I am actually a very different parent to both my children. With my first child, I was a parent who did not have a child before and who has a single child. With my second one, I already have some parenting experience and there is another child at home. So I'm to both my children. And that makes a big difference in who they are, the kind of expectations that we have, the kind of time we actually have for both of them. And finding a way to manage that relationship between the siblings is also a big parenting journey. And it's something that children can start to think about. And what is the respect that we can have for each other, for all the siblings in the house? And how can we start to care for each other? Because the relationship of siblings is a very critical aspect of managing that relationship is critical in any parent's life. And however you can be supportive in smoothing that relationship with your siblings, in enhancing that relationship, in repairing that relationship, in cherishing that relationship, those things bring tremendous joy and support to your parents. So last year, of course, I mean, I was sharing the office room. It's called the office room, but it's basically my kids took over what was supposed to be my office. They set up their tent basically over here. Behind me was their desk, and they would do their Zoom calls from there, and I would do my Zoom calls from here. And they had their territories in some ways, right? They had some toys to share. They had their own little desks, but finding a way to manage that relationship and build a sense of support with each other was also something that helped us a lot. So what we do now in a very concrete way, since last year we had a lot of classes on Zoom, we continued some of them, of course, like most parents now. My daughter does Chinese classes and the younger one also does Chinese classes. So the older one, we call it Lao Shi Love, which is basically Lao Shi means teacher in Chinese. And Lao Shi Love means an elder sister is going to give the younger one love and care as a teacher herself. So when my little one is in a Zoom class, the older one is actually sitting next to her, not on the Zoom screen. She's reading a book or whatever. But when the little one is stumbling for something, the older one gives Lao Shi Love, teacher love, to say, okay, nudge her a little bit, support her, help her understand what is being asked. And that in that way, it builds a sense of, I won't say dependence, but it builds a sense of gratitude, builds a sense of indebtedness that, yeah, my sister is doing this for me and what else can I do? And I remind the younger one, of course, she's young, she's only 5. She may not understand now, but it helps me as a story to tell her when she's older, hey, do you remember what Avika did when you were young, when you were sitting on the Zoom call? She would actually help you. And I'm hoping that she would be grateful about that. Instead of saying, oh, big deal. I mean, all sisters do that. But there's something that we sort of institute in the family that allows them to have time together. Helping on projects, right? What are the things that you can actually do around the house? Is it like creating a family album, the meal plan, any other ways? There are many, many things in which siblings can partner with each other and contribute to lessening the load on a parent or a grandparent in the house. And lastly, the big bucket that I have is on a sense of connectedness, right? And this is what kind of kept us sane through last year, is relying on our broader community to connect and relying on the broader community for our kids to connect. So we have spoken to cousins in countries that we normally would not have thought to call because it was not our second nature to go on Zoom or, there's WhatsApp and we do WhatsApp videos. But normally what happens is you call somebody when you're in their city, you go to their country and say, hey, I'm here. Can we meet or can we have a call or something like that? But this past year, those are the silver linings. It allowed us to connect with cousins, with friends that we felt we had lost touch with, and bringing that sense of rootedness for your child as well, because they're not going out, they're not meeting anybody, they're not seeing their grandparents, they're not seeing their cousins and friends. And in some way, you're kind of traveling in your head through these conversations with people around the world. And it's the same thing that's kind of happening today as well. So when Netra and Nimna and Binu bring us all together, I feel like I'm traveling to all the different places that you're in and having a conversation with you, because this is the only way I can do that at this moment. I can't get out of Singapore, but I continue to maintain my sense of international identity or international connectedness by having conversations with people who are outside of this place and bringing their world to me and showing a little bit of my world to them. And how can children do that even more? Maybe an organization like this is a fantastic platform. And I think every one of you who is a participant today, you are an ambassador of SpunkGo, you are an ambassador of KeyNote, and you need to spread that word, because there's no better way than to bring a sense of connectedness than to have a platform for conversations with people around the world, whether it's with cousins, whether it's with friends, whether it's with students around the world. I think this is something that's absolutely needed. And I was picking up my child today from one of her classes just before starting. I was telling her about what I'm going to talk about. And I was thinking, wow, is there something that Avika can do at her age to bring kids her age together around the world? And I am so inspired by Netra and Nimna and everybody who's behind SpunkGo, because this is what kids need now. This is what children need to do. And it's inspiring not just for your peers, it's inspiring for me to see, wow, how can I actually be supportive? And that's one way in finding that sense of connectedness beyond the challenges that we have at this moment, and reinforcing them in some sustainable way. So it's not just about connecting once, but how can you ensure that you have something, I wouldn't say again scheduled, but a systematic way of keeping and replenishing those connections that you have made over the past years. And that, I think, is a fantastic way as a child. You can have that sense of balance with your siblings, with your peers, which brings tremendous joy to parents as well when we see our children becoming even more independent. So on that note, maybe we have some time for questions or comments, and I'll let Binu moderate the session. I try to keep it as informal as possible because I'm not showing PowerPoints or videos, but I wanted to share with you my personal journey and some things that have worked for me as a parent in the past year. So look forward to hearing your questions and any comments that you have in the comments section.
Thank you, Aarti. That was a fantastic session. I would have Netra read out the questions for you. She has them with her. So we've got about 6 to 7 questions. So without further ado, I will pass it on for Netra to take you to the question and answer session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Binu. This session has been very inspiring. And I think we all need to know, we know now that we have some role in Mother's Day. So we have a few questions from the audience here. The first question is, parenting during the pandemic has been really challenging for parents and children alike. We have had really high rates of teenage pregnancy, child marriage, and high cases of incest. So what gap did parents leave between them and their children?
Sorry, what gap? Say again, what?
What gap has been left between the parents and the children?
Yeah, okay. Interesting question, indeed. And this is what strikes me as the first thing that comes to my mind at this moment is what conversation, when you say what gaps have been, are there between a parent and a child in a situation like this, the first thing that comes to my mind is what conversations have been missed in the past, and what is the opportunity now for new conversations with the concerned children, whatever their situation may be, as difficult as it may be. are parents ready to have those difficult conversations with their children? And how can we bring to bear a certain notion of responsibility and empathy for what a child is going through if they are in a situation of teenage pregnancy or any other challenges that they may have at that age? So, and I'm speaking once again to be fully transparent. I don't have a teenage child. Both my children are below 10 years old. Although I think the second one behaves like a 15-year-old, and that's challenging in its own way. But what I'm telling you now comes from my experiences or my conversations with my peers who have teenage children. Maybe not the exact challenges that you've shared right now, but similar or different ones. And they always talk about, I wish I had this conversation. Now I'm going to fill those gaps. Are essentially conversations in some ways that families don't always have. And I can tell you, even in my house, we don't always, with my parents, talking about emotions is not easy for my parents. They're definitely not easy for my dad. And when we have difficult emotions in the house, you don't always have that sense. You don't have the vocabulary. You don't know how to do that. I think that's also the challenge, because when a child is born, you're kind of on your own. And every parent is not prepared for the next stage. As many books as you may read, as many parenting workshops or peers you may speak to, you're not truly prepared. And you think you are, maybe you're there 60-70%, but many of the times you're kind of doing it on the go. And that can be very challenging. And in thinking about not just the parent, but also from the support system perspective, right? How can we prepare parents into the parenting role, or into the mothering role? That is something that is not always done. We are expected to know everything when we have a child, and that's just impossible. And when a situation comes that's challenging in front of us, especially with teenagers, it's even more difficult, I think, even though at this moment there are lots of support systems in schools, depending on where you are. There are some schemes that colleges may also provide in providing counseling, but both need to have the gap is the conversation, and the conversation between the child and the parent, conversation between the parent and the support system. That could be the workplace. For some people, it's a religious support system. For some people, it's a family support system. For some people, it's a workplace support system. Whatever it may be, I think having more conversations on how to prepare for and care for one another in a situation like this is what might fill that gap a bit, at least.
I agree. How can we respect our mothers, not only on Mother's Day, but every day?
Just the way you do it on Mother's Day. every day, my husband and I were talking about why do we have these days? And so I told him, this Mother's Day is coming up, and I'm invited to give a talk. And he says, yeah, but why do we have that one day? I said, okay, at least we have that one day to have conversations around what is mothering, what are the challenges, what are the constraints, what is inspiration we can have from each other. So it's really important to mark those moments with the day. I think the way to continue to respect how do we do that? Maybe it's something to ask ourselves. Do we need a schedule for that? Do we need a reminder for that? Is that something that we do in a reactive way, or is that something that we do in a proactive way? Are we respectful to our parents because of, or are we respectful to our parents or our mothers because we just internalize that respect towards them? And I think that's one way to have a sense of gratitude. I think once I internalize that sense of gratitude, I still fight with my mother. We still have our arguments. That doesn't mean I'm disrespectful to her. I still show care in that difficult conversation that might be there. So trying to define what is respect in your family is also very important, because the way we show respect with each other is very different, and it can also be differently expected. So I I share with my daughters what it means to respect me, the way in which I expect them to behave. But I have not had that conversation with my own mother. And I think that's also those missed conversations on what does respect mean for a parent in my family? And how can I show that? What are their expectations around it? Because we don't talk about these things. And we find it very odd to have these conversations that may be very new to some of us. So I think figuring out how your mother would like to be honored and loved and cared for would be a starting point, right? To say, hey, mom, how would you like me to show love, care, trust, and respect and support towards you? And she might be pleasantly surprised by that question.
Has your job impacted your way or style of parenting?
Has my job impacted my way or style of parenting? It really depends on what's going on at work. So in the broader sense, in the grand scheme of things, yes, it certainly has given me much less time to be a parent, but that also allows me to manage my time as a parent better. How else has my job impacted me? I think my job took me to a new country, and the new country showed me a different way to parent, a different way to understand what being a mother is. And that was my job in France. So I think in many ways, not just in terms of time and the scheduling, but it's given me a sense of gratitude for the different roles that I play. It has certainly added more stress. It has certainly added tension in the house to say, how do we manage that? And when there are tremendous demands at work, like last year was very, very difficult on the work front because we had to care for the students, we had to care for the faculty, if we had a case or whatever, then there was a certain protocol to follow, very high stress situations for not just for me, even my colleagues. And that meant that I am absent at home. So my job has forced me to make some trade-offs in terms of the time that I spend. And I do rationalize to myself that, hey, it's not the length of the time, it's the quality time. But I can tell you it is still very difficult moments where you've had a long day, your child is there waiting to have this amazing conversation with you. And I'll be talking about having conversations, but you're not in that mood, to have that conversation. But you have to switch off. Learning to switch off and center and come back as a new self takes a certain amount of energy. My parenting has actually impacted my job. So there are some things that I say no to. There are some things that I think are not kind of worth my time because I'd rather it's more pleasurable sometimes to watch my child sleeping than to do something not so fun for work. And I think that sense of letting go of things at work, I'm much more at peace at this moment because it's a trade-off that I don't want to have. And so both roles have influenced each other in positive ways and in ways that take either energy or time from each other. But in the grand scheme of things, I think it sort of balances out in some way.
Have you taken any parenting tips from your mother and implemented it into the way you parent now?
Oh, this is a very interesting question. I mean, even in my 40s, I would like to blame my mother for all the things I am today, right? And one of the comments was also kind of alluding to that because and it's so true. If I could just go back to one of the comments about how I talk to my child is very much like how my mother had spoken to me. And how we parent is so influenced by how we have been parented. So more than I don't need tips from my mother. It's almost all internalized that I'm going to end up being like her. And that can be a very pleasant thing, or that can be a very scary thing, depending on how you were parented and how you feel about that parenting at this moment as an adult. So as a child, we just kind of took on whatever parenting was thrown at us, right? And parents don't know better. To be to be like fully honest. They are trying their best, but they are going to slip up. They are going to make mistakes. They might say things that they did not mean. They might be hurtful. They might be loving. They might make decisions on your behalf that you may at this moment, in your adulthood, not agree on. So you are already socialized in a certain family setup that has a certain parenting style, that has a certain vocabulary of love, of anger, of forgiveness. And those things influence how you are going to parent your child. Like even lullabies, I realize the way I'm putting my child to bed is like how my mother puts my daughter to bed, and how she used to put me to bed. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I am her. And I have mixed feelings about that, So it's parenting tips come, more actively. I do ask about some things where it's something related. My mother has been in education. So in some ways, she has had exposure to children beyond her own and beyond her grandchildren. And so she has been a principal of a school. She has been a teacher trainer. So she has that kind of framework in her mind. But there's always that expertise that she has is always in conflict with who I think I am as a mother and an expert now, because clearly I have 2 children, so I must be an expert, right? But it's a negotiated space, I would say, on what advice I ask about and what advice I take. So she may give me a lot of advice that I may not ask for, but I listen to that. Earlier, I would probably have reacted to say, okay, look, I didn't ask for it, so I don't need it, but I'm okay. I'm giving her the space to share. And then I take what makes sense for me, because that avoids any sort of conflict on, yeah, but in that generation, you were doing like that, but this is a very different generation of parenting. And so I think there are some things that are constant and some things that are generationally different in the kind of exposure we have now as parents, the kind of ideas of parenting that we have, how we relate to our children, how I relate to my children is very different from how she was relating to me and how she continues to relate to me. So I think taking tips and asking for tips is a very interesting area between a new mother or the younger mother and the older parent. So that was my experience to share. Yeah.
So we actually are running out of time, and we have hit that 2 o'clock marker, but no. If you would be okay to stay on for a few more questions, we'll be taking the previous ones, so any new ones probably will not be addressed. So with that in mind, how do you balance your work life best, and how has homeschooling affected you and your children?
Okay, how do I balance? Work-life balance is one of the things that I have researched on, and I also teach as a part of the MBA course on managing people at work, managing oneself at work. So the way I see balance is starting with the acceptance that there is no balance. And I look at it not from a day-to-day perspective or a week-to-week or a month-to-month, but it's really my timeline for balance is over the year, because my job demands tremendously from me in certain periods of my time, periods of the year. And the parenting role will demand in some other periods of the year. So having that day-to-day balance, monthly balance, weekly balance, I just forget about that, because for me, that's just impossible to have. And I would be whipping myself every morning for not having that balance in the day. So there may not be daily balance, but over a period of time, and whatever that period of time may be for you, it could be over a month, it could be over 6 months. What is the balance you are willing to accept? And I start to use the word balance less and say imbalance. So when I'm at work during high stress or high demand time, clearly I'm imbalanced at home. I am not present with my children. I'm not present with my husband. I'm not present with my parents. I'm not present with my friends. And that imbalance can go on for a week. Maybe it's 2 weeks. Maybe it's 3 weeks. Maybe my travels take me very far and I'm not home sometimes for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, right? So I'm clearly imbalanced on the home front. And maybe the same thing goes on for fitness, right? So maybe I haven't exercised for a month, 2 months, 3 months. That's a period of imbalance. But the thing to ask yourself is, how long am I willing to be in a state of imbalance? When do I want to pivot and bring some balance to the areas of my life that I have not actually spent time in? So being at work for an entire month and being stressed about something for an entire month is just, it's ridiculous. It's crazy. So I try to find when I can bring the balance back. So that's how I think about it. It's a day-to-day challenge in the sense that, yeah, I have to schedule my time. I do need to make time for my work, for my children as well. So how has homeschooling affected my, so I'm going to answer that question because the context in which we are in now is very different from maybe some places that our participants might be in. In Singapore, we had to have homeschooling for a few months. So last year, May, June, July, and a little bit of August. And then from September onwards, they were all back to school and they're continuing to be in school. So they're not studying from home. But the homeschooling period was new. We actually sort of gave up on some things because the school was also trying to figure out what the Zoom thing is, how to do this learning platform, how to train the teachers. And my daughter was at that time, the younger one was 4.5. And if she missed a Zoom session, the world is not going to come to an end. I'd rather that she be happy playing with something than go for that 15-minute Zoom session where most of the kids are trying to figure out what is going on for those 15 minutes, right? So we just let go of many things during this homeschooling part. And to be fully transparent, my husband took on the lion's share of managing their Zoom schedule. So I would have it on my calendar to know when my child is going to have a class so that if there was a device that needed to be charged or whatever, we had those things ready. But he pretty much managed the schedule for that. The kids, they love to see their classmates online. I think it was more a sense of connection than for actual learning per se. At that age, at the age of, I think, below 10, having Zoom classes only is quite challenging for the child. And so the school minimized that kind of interaction. So they had more one-on-one sessions with the children, with the students as much as possible. So the teacher would carve out time to have one session with just my daughter rather than with everybody else. And every school has managed it differently. So my experience with homeschooling was, or our experience in the family was very minimal with 3 or 4 months. And I know that was already challenging. I can imagine it being even more challenging for parents who've had that for even more extended of time without the resources in their house or at the schools that are trying to manage this.
Thank you, Aarti. This will be our last question, so I will be handing it over to Nimna after this. What ways have you used to handle the children when they become aggressive towards each other and they exchange bitter words? And if a parent has a view that differs from a child, how do we change their point of view?
Okay, so there are 3 questions in there. I will try to answer the first one and then go on to the second one. When children are not nice to each other, they exchange bitter words, they're kind of aggressive with each other. It depends on the mood that I am in at that time. So do I want to deal with this or do I not want to deal with that? Because trying to break up a fight all the time is very tiring for a parent. And so there are moments I'm like, you know what, fight it out because I don't have the energy to deal with that. Secondly, if it is something that there was some physical hitting or scratching or pushing, those kinds of things. And I have 2 daughters. They hit each other, they scratch each other, they push each other. They do what kids do. And to me, if it goes above the normal range of what is kind of acceptable rough play, then I step in and say, okay, that's really disrespectful, right? And this is the one sister that you have at home. And you need to be respectful towards her. So building that sense of respect, again, that figure it out, hug it out that I mentioned earlier comes a lot when we see them fighting. arguing for something. They want a toy or she wants a candy, that, or you have more candy, then you have more ice cream. Like, guys, stop it, right? I mean, figure it out, or you hug it out, try to find that negotiation. Words for forgiveness, words for asking for forgiveness, how to say sorry and how to mean it when you say that. Those are the conversations that we are having. I don't have all the answers to what is the perfect solution between them, because I'm thinking, maybe there's something I could have done differently with how they're actually dealing with that sorry. And the older one is more genuine in her sorries. My younger one, let's say it's work in progress when she says sorry and trying to mean that. And I think kids eventually come around. They will fight one day, and then the next day they're kind of painting together and they forget about it actually. And we think about that more than I think they think about it. But when they agree, so the second question was what? If your parenting style is not the same as what a child wants, yeah, huge area of negotiation sometimes in our house. I mean, there are moments when my daughter would tell me, that's actually not how a parent should be dealing with this situation. She's 8, and she uses big words towards me, and so I try not to lose my cool, and I say, okay, be curious, just be curious, ask her questions, because that will diffuse. And the one thing that I've learned also in my role in the organization leading the place is your job is to de-escalate and diffuse the situation. So how can I diffuse this argument and bring that sense of curiosity? So this is not this. I don't agree with what you're saying. Say, okay, tell me more. Okay, what is it that you don't agree with, right? Is it about what I said? Is it about how I said it? Is it about what you're supposed to do? Or is it about the feeling that you have? So we try to make it into a conversation, which sometimes can be more energy demanding, but it definitely avoids a fight. That doesn't mean that every situation that my child argues with me, I come in with this amazing Zen perspective. I mean, there are moments that I'm losing it, right? And the moments that I don't have a grip on what's going on. And so those moments I do feel post the moment, I'm having my pangs of guilt. And yeah, I should not have screamed, or I should not have said that. But you're human too. And you've had a long day. There are so many things on your plate. And there's only so much that you can actually share in terms of that optimism and positivity, and constantly being that aware parent. Sometimes parents are not always aware. And I am more forgiving of my mother now, because when I'm in a similar situation, I can say, okay, now I understand why she said that, or she would have said that, or she would have done that, because clearly she was not having a good day, or so many things were on her plate. So our go-to thing when they don't agree with is to try to understand why. Our last resort is to say, because I said so, So there are, when it really goes on to a stretch and there's disrespect or they disagree, it's like, look, I am saying it, I am the parent, and you just do as I say, right? That's used not very often, thankfully. But you're very tempted to say, I say that because, you need to do it because I said so, and it's right because I said so, right? But that, I don't think that allows for a better conversation, or that solves the problem, or that makes a child feel valued. And that same situation will come back again. The same issue crops up again in another way, from another trigger. So yeah, that's kind of how we try to build a new conversation around a disagreement. If we have that bandwidth, and if we really feel that curiosity to do that.
Thank you, Dr. Aarti, for these very inspiring words. I will now call on Nimna to close.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Aarti, for those inspiring words, and for the keynote speakers for the cooperation in organizing. And also, I need to thank Netra for initiating this unique forum, SpunkGo. And also for all our SpunkGo members, especially from our new chapters, Sri Lanka and Pakistan. Hope you all are having a meaningful takeaway from today's webinar. And also I'll make this a chance to announce the webinars that are going to happen in June. There'll be two. One on the Environment Day with keynote women speakers, and the other one, the usual SpunkGo webinar with a speaker from World Wildlife Fund. All right, and also you can visit our website. It's www.spungo.com to watch our previous webinars, and also you can follow us through Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. All right then, by also wishing all the wonderful mothers around a very happy Mother's Day. I'll end it up from here since we are running out of time. Okay then, thank you all for joining. Have a great day ahead. Bye-bye.